All right, folks, welcome back to another review. We got a new legendary here for Warlock. It's Zakul, and he's tying together this Abyssal curse thing that's been teased. We'll talk about it. He's a new 5-mana 6/5. He reads, your Abyssal curses heal you for the damage they deal, and Battlecry, give your opponent an Abyssal curse. So there was one other card revealed previously. We were kind of waiting on more details for. It's this one, the Abyssal Wave. This is also a card that's going to give your opponent an Abyssal curse. And I'm presuming there will be more than just these two as well. I suspect we'll get at least one more Abyssal curse card. And the curse is a card that you put in your opponent's hand. It's 2 mana. It's going to read at the start of your turn, take 1 damage. This is kind of a placeholder text for what they released, but it's been confirmed it'll start at 1 damage. And then each curse is going to increment that damage. So if your opponent doesn't choose to play it, they can spend 2 mana to play it out of hand and remove the curse. But if they don't play it, the first curse would deal 1 damage and then 1 damage. The next curse would deal 2 damage and then 2 damage. And then the next curse would deal 3 damage and then 3 damage. So it's kind of like either putting a 2 mana tax on your opponent's turn where they have to get rid of it, or maybe stacking up some damage over the course of the game. And Zakul in particular here adds this bonus: your Abyssal curses heal you for the damage they deal. So you can get a little bit of damage and a little bit of healing. Now, do note, this does not say this game. At first, I thought this was going to be a this game sort of effect, where for the rest of the game, your curses would heal you, but it doesn't say that. It's just text on the card. So I think Zakul has to be on board for the curses to heal you. So you're probably only going to get 1 turn here where the curse heals you. So if you were to play Zakul first of your curses, he would really only heal you for 1, presumably before your opponent removed it. Theoretically, if you've stacked up some curses over the course of the game, he might be healing for 4 or 5 right away. Then if your opponent removes them, of course, you're going to kind of lose out on that healing, but could be kind of like a deal 4, heal 4 sort of card right off the bat as a finisher of sorts or recovery tool of sorts. That said, I think this feels a little slow to get rolling for Hearthstone these days. Basically, you need lots of cards that are shuffling in these curses. It's taking a long time. You're still sort of giving your opponent some agency over how they handle these curses and how they control the damage output. I don't think the healing return here on Zakul is going to be significant enough. If it were this game, yeah, sure, that would be a neat way to stack up lots of long-term healing and damage and this kind of dot idea of burning your opponent down over a number of turns. I don't think that exists so much with Zakul. There's not that much survivability here. Stat line's fine for 5 mana, but I don't think the payoff is nearly high enough, whether it's on the healing side or the curse side of things. So this is looking like to me is going to be a pretty awkward and slow package, and I don't think Zakul is significant enough or, good enough essentially to change that fate for the curses. So let's go ahead and circle back to the Abyssal Wave. I was holding out on this one until we learned more about curses. Now that we can talk about it. It's a 6-mana spell for Warlock, Shadow, deal 4 damage to all minions, give your opponent an Abyssal curse. Again, this just feels really slow to me. 6 mana to deal 4. It doesn't scale that well by the time you're getting up to 6 mana. There's a lot of boards that aren't going to care about that. It is symmetrical as well, so of course you risk hurting your own stuff. And I still think this is a really slow way to get curses into play. It's just like, man, 6 mana to get 1 curse out. That's a lot. And my opponent's spending 2 mana maybe to get rid of the curse, so that might slow them down. But I feel like I wasted 2 mana on an Abyssal curse or Abyssal Wave, because this kind of feels more like a 4 mana card in a lot of ways, right? It doesn't feel quite as high output as you'd expect for 6. So I don't even really know if the overhead you're putting on your opponent is enough to make up the difference. And yes, of course, the curses do some unavoidable damage over multiple curses, but is it really going to be fast enough or meaningful enough to make what I think are pretty substandard plays off both the Wave and off of Zakul? I don't think so. This package feels like it could be some fun to goof around with, trying to find ways to get extra curses in hand to do some shenanigans, but overall it seems very slow and pretty low output for what you'd expect this sort of thing to do if it were successful. All right, next up here's the Bottom Feeder, a new Druid minion. He's a 1-mana 1/3 beast with Death Rattle. Add a Bottom Feeder to the bottom of your deck with a permanent +2/+2. So very much some Sunscale Raptor vibes here. The Hunter 1/3 Frenzy card that had a very similar style effect, but really I think this one does it even better. The Death Rattle's more likely to go off than Frenzy. The buff is bigger, and I would argue it's perhaps even a better fit in Druid than in Hunter. So the bottom feeder, I think, has a lot of things to love here. Number one, at a base level, it's just got that Dire Mole stat line. It's got that Beast tag. That might offer some utility to Druid just straight up. Even without the Death Rattle, this could still be a reasonable card just to play out on one or to utilize with other synergistic pieces or extra summons and so on. But on top of that, you've got this Death Rattle upside, which is going to give you some nice stocky minions at the bottom of your deck, recursively growing throughout the course of a game if you're able to play more and more of them. And of course, since they're going to the bottom of your deck, that is a Dredge enabler. We've already seen some Dredge stuff show up for Druid. We've even got like Sir Finley as well, which could grab a couple of these, which might help you get some very efficient 3/5s or larger fairly early in the game if you're looking for that, or if you're able to play it long or maybe shuffle your deck with some Squirrel, Acorn shuffles and such. You might be able to kind of weave these in throughout the course of the game for some punchy 1-mana stats, basically well overstated minions that continue to give you some depth. Now, do I think these will be like a fatigue prevention card or some kind of like Jade Idol sort of threat? I don't think they have quite that much potential. Games tend to not really play that direction in Hearthstone lately anyway. But they're a bit on a delay, and it takes some time to get all this stuff to happen. You got to redraw the cards, replay them. They're not going to have rush or taunt or anything. They don't get that crazy big that fast. So unlike Jade Idol, which could create some like cycling scenarios with auctioneers and stuff where you'd play a bunch of Jade Idols all at once, it's going to be a little harder to do that sort of thing with a bottom feeder. It's probably going to come out like one at a time, which doesn't create those overwhelming pressure scenarios. So I don't really see that angle, but it doesn't need it necessarily. I think this does enough on its own as just a base minion with that occasional, bottom feeder upside, essentially, of those extra stats. So I do like this card pretty well. Plus, I'm going to try to make some crazy greedy stuff happen with this one, which sounds really fun. Death Rattle synergies, make multiples of these go off, get a bunch of bottom feeders. That's going to be great, but that's more meme. I think this card is solid as is. And then next up here, we have the Trench Surveyor, a new mage mech minion. He's a 2-mana, 3/2 Battlecry Dredge. And if it's a mech, you're going to draw it. So clearly in a mech deck with lots of mechs, we're going to be reliably hitting this Dredge and drawing stuff. 2-mana, 3/2 that draws a card. Fantastic. That's great. Very cheap, efficient draw. Gets a solid, well-statted body on board for its cost. You can't go wrong there. Plus the draw is going to be what you want it to be, whether that's filling in a curve of a mech. There's some 3-drop mechs we already saw for mage, or just the highest power thing. A+ effect when it's hitting a mech. If it's not hitting a mech, you're not nearly as excited about this card, I think. Dredge in and of itself without the draw isn't really all that great. It can be fine to play down just to make sure you're fitting your curve or finding good stuff, but you really want that resource to make this card feel great. So do I think this will see play outside of mech decks? Not really. I think it has to be in a mech shell for the Trench Surveyor to make sense. And if it's in a mech shell, it's going to be great. So this is one of those cards where it's like, obviously this lines up well if mechs work. If mechs don't work, this is going to be tough. I personally don't see mechs coming together for mage just quite yet. Does not feel like it's going to be a higher tier deck based on what we've seen so far. It might take a few expansions or follow-up cards for mech mage to really get there. So this might be a card you kind of bank for a while. May not see play immediately, but eventually, as soon as the stars align, this is clearly a great piece for mech decks. Zakul is a 2-star card. Abyssal Wave is a 2-star card. Bottom Feeder is a 4-star card. Trench Surveyor is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. It wraps it up for this review. We're 15 reviews deep. This has been a longer reveal season than normal, but it sounds like we're going to have a little bit of a gap until maybe April 5th, or we'll perhaps have one more review to close things out. We still got, I don't know, I think 30, 40 cards left. So still quite a bit to see, but I don't know if there's going to be any reviews scheduled. There's nothing on the schedule until the 5th. So stay tuned, I guess. We'll get cards as soon as they're out. But until then, thanks so much for watching. Share your thoughts on all these cards down in the comments below. And until next time, game on.